It was a bright Tuesday morning when Allison showed up at my doorstep unannounced. I could tell from her smile, that particular smile she'd been using since she was a teenager, that she wanted something from me. "Mom," she said, settling onto my couch as if she owned the place, "I have some exciting news to share with you." I poured us both coffee, watching her carefully. At 68 years old, I'd become pretty good at reading my daughter's intentions. "Mark and I have finally booked that dream vacation to the Bahamas," she announced, her eyes shining with excitement. 3 whole weeks of paradise. "We've been saving up for this for ages." "That sounds wonderful, honey," I replied genuinely. "You two deserve some time away." Her smile widened, and then came what I had been expecting all along. "So we need you to watch Emma and Jake while we're gone. It's all arranged, 3 weeks starting next Friday." I felt my stomach tighten. Arranged? Without even asking me? This had been happening more and more lately. Allison simply assuming my time was completely at her disposal. "I'm sorry, Allison," I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "I can't watch the kids for 3 weeks straight. I have my own plans." The change in her expression was immediate. Her smile vanished, replaced by a look of disbelief that quickly morphed into irritation. "Your plans?" she scoffed, letting out a laugh that cut straight through me. "What plans could you possibly have, Mom? You're retired. Besides, it's what grandmothers do. After everything we've done for you, everything they'd done for me." I felt a wave of indignation rising in my chest. The memories of the past decade came flooding back. Selling my beloved house in the suburbs, the home where I'd raised Allison and spent 38 years with her father to help her and Mark buy their McMansion in that fancy gated community. The $85,000 I'd handed over from my retirement savings to fund Allison's boutique clothing store that went bankrupt within a year. The $25,000 emergency loan when Mark was between jobs. Money that was supposedly just until he gets back on his feet, but had never been repaid. "What exactly have you done for me, Allison?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. She looked stunned. I rarely questioned her demands. "How can you be so selfish?" she shot back, standing up as if my question had physically pushed her from the couch. "We give you money every month. We invite you to family dinners. We check on you regularly. Do you know how many other grandmothers would be thrilled to spend time with their grandkids instead of sitting alone in a tiny apartment? Money every month?" She occasionally dropped off $200 when she remembered, which barely covered a fraction of what I spent on the grandkids. Between the organic snacks they insisted on, the new toys they begged for, the clothes they needed because Allison forgot to pack enough, I easily spent $400, $500 every weekend they stayed with me. "Allison," I said, standing up to face her, "I've supported you for your entire life. I sold my home, your childhood home, for $310,000, and gave you every penny to help you buy your house. I gave you $85,000 from my retirement fund for your store. I loaned you and Mark $25,000 when he lost his job at the firm. None of that has ever been repaid." Allison's mouth opened and closed, momentarily at a loss for words, but she quickly recovered her defensive stance. "That's different, Mom," she insisted. "That was family helping family. And taking care of your children for free isn't helping the family?" I countered. "Every weekend, every school vacation, every time one of them has a sniffle and you can't miss work, that doesn't count." Her face flushed with anger. She wasn't used to me standing my ground. "It's different," she repeated. "You're their grandmother. It's your responsibility." That word again, responsibility. As if becoming a grandmother automatically enrolled me in some unpaid childcare service with no say in the matter. "My responsibility as a grandmother," I said quietly but firmly, "is to love my grandchildren and be part of their lives. Not to be your free, on-demand babysitter whenever it's convenient for you." Allison was fuming now, pacing back and forth across my small living room like a caged tiger. She stopped directly in front of me, eyes blazing. "I can't believe this," she said, her voice quivering with anger. "You've turned into a bitter old woman. This isn't the mother I grew up with." Her words stung, but they also ignited something deep inside me. a flame of self-respect that had been smothered for years under the weight of guilt and manipulation. "You know what's changed, Allison?" I asked, meeting her gaze. "I finally realized that I've spent the last decade being treated like an ATM machine in a free childcare service. I've given and given until there's almost nothing left to give." Allison started to respond, but her phone buzzed. She glanced at it impatiently. "It's Mark," she muttered. "I have to go." "But this conversation isn't over, Mom. I'll be back tomorrow, and I expect you to have come to your senses by then." She grabbed her designer purse and headed for the door. Before leaving, she turned back with one final barb. "I already told the kids they'd be staying with their favorite grandma. Think about how heartbroken they'll be when I tell them you don't want them around." The door slammed behind her, the sound echoing through my apartment. I sank back onto the couch, my hands trembling. For the first time in years, perhaps decades, I had stood up to Allison. I had said no, but I knew my daughter well enough to know that this was just the opening skirmish in what would become a full-blown war. As I watched through the window as Allison drove away in her luxury SUV, I wondered if I had the strength to hold my ground. What I couldn't have known then was that this single act of defiance would completely transform our relationship, and that the real battle for my independence had only just begun. The phone rang precisely 42 minutes after Allison left. It was Mark. His voice had that artificial warmth he always used when he wanted something. "Hey there, Barbara," he said, as if we were the best of friends. "Allison told me about your misunderstanding. I thought I'd give you a call to clear things up." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I knew their playbook by heart now. Allison had tried the direct approach and failed. Now Mark would attempt the smooth-talking charm offensive. "There was no misunderstanding, Mark," I replied firmly. "You both want me to watch the kids for 3 weeks without even checking if I'm available, and I said no. It's very straightforward." Mark chuckled, that condescending laugh that always made my skin crawl. Barbara," he said as if speaking to a confused child. "You know we appreciate everything you do for us. The kids absolutely adore you. It would be such a shame to deprive them of quality time with their grandmother." There it was, using my love for Emma and Jake as emotional leverage, but I was prepared this time. "Mark," I said calmly, "if you want the children to spend time with me, you can bring them over for visits after you return from your vacation, but I won't be your live-in babysitter for 3 weeks." His tone shifted instantly, the fake warmth evaporating like morning dew. "Look, Barbara," he said, his voice hardening. "We've spent $12,000 on this vacation. The tickets are non-refundable. The resort is fully paid for. We can't cancel now just because you've decided to be difficult." "Difficult?" I almost laughed at the absurdity. "Mark," I replied, "you planned and paid for an expensive vacation without confirming that I could watch your children. How is your poor planning my responsibility?" Silence on the other end. He clearly hadn't expected me to respond so logically. "Besides," I continued, taking advantage of his silence, "if you can afford a $12,000 vacation, surely you can afford to hire a professional nanny for 3 weeks. That would cost what? Maybe." Mark sighed dramatically. "Barbara, you don't understand. We've been saving for this trip for 2 years. We don't have an extra $3,000 just lying around." His statement was so transparently false that I nearly choked on my tea. "You don't have an extra $3,000? I asked incredulously. "Mark, I saw the photos on Facebook of the new 85-inch television you installed in your basement last month. That cost at least $2,500. And what about the spa weekend Allison posted about 2 weeks ago? That couldn't have been cheap." Mark was silent again, clearly caught off guard by my awareness of their spending habits. "Those are different kinds of expenses," he finally mumbled. "They're for our mental health and well-being." "And what about your children's well-being?" I asked. "You'd rather spend money on luxury items than pay for professional childcare for your own kids." Mark's patience was clearly wearing thin. "Listen, Barbara," he said sharply. "Let's be realistic here. You're their grandmother. That's your role in this family. You can't just decide you don't want to fulfill your responsibilities anymore." His words hit me like a slap. My role, my responsibilities, as if I were nothing more than a function, an appliance to be used at their convenience. Mark, I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite my rising anger. My role as a grandmother is to love those children, not to be your unpaid employee. My responsibility is to be present in their lives, not to sacrifice my own so you and Allison can live more comfortably. Mark let out a harsh laugh. More comfortably? Barbara, we work ourselves to the bone. We deserve this vacation. You're retired. You've got nothing but time on your hands. Nothing but time? I repeated, the anger now bubbling over. Mark, I'm 68, not 98. I have my own life, my own interests, my own plans. What plans could someone your age possibly have? He asked dismissively. Let's be honest, Barbara. Your social life consists of your book club and watching crime shows on TV. In that moment, something inside me snapped. This man, this entitled, condescending man who had taken so much from me over the years, was speaking to me as if I were nothing more than an outdated appliance, kept around only for its remaining utility. This conversation is over, Mark, I said with an icy calm that surprised even me. I will not be watching the children. You can either hire a nanny or cancel your trip. Those are your options. Wait, Barbara, he said quickly, sensing he pushed too far. Let's work something out. What if we paid you? Would $500 for the 3 weeks make it worth your while? I actually laughed out loud. $500 for 3 weeks of round-the-clock childcare? That works out to about $3.50 an hour, Mark. A professional nanny would charge at least $20 an hour. Mark fell silent, presumably doing the math. Okay, $800 then. That's our final offer. My final answer is still no, I replied. This isn't a negotiation. I've made my decision. His voice turned threatening. I hope you don't regret this, Barbara. Allison is really upset. The kids will be devastated. And well, we won't forget this. Are you threatening me, Mark? I asked directly. Of course not, he backpedaled with fake innocence. I'm just explaining the consequences of your actions. Families support each other, Barbara. When someone doesn't pull their weight, things change. I hung up without another word, my hands shaking not with fear but with a strange, exhilarating sense of resolve. Moments later, my doorbell rang. It was my neighbor, Diane, a vibrant 65-year-old widow who had become my closest friend over the past few years. Barbara, she said as soon as I opened the door. I heard raised voices from my apartment. Is everything okay? I invited her in and told her the whole story. Diane listened intently, nodding occasionally, and frowning at other times. When I finished, she sat silently for a moment, then squeezed my hand. Barbara, she said firmly, it's about damn time. I've been watching them take advantage of you for years. Her words were like a balm to my frayed nerves. Do you really think I did the right thing? Honey, she replied, I've been waiting for you to stand up for yourself. Allison swoops in here like she owns the place. Mark treats you like you're their employee, and you've always just gone along with it. It was time you showed them some boundaries. Diane stayed with me through the afternoon. We drank tea, talked about our lives, our dreams, our regrets. I realized how long it had been since I'd had a conversation like this, uninterrupted by demands from Allison or the needs of the grandchildren. You know what you should do? Diane said before leaving. You should plan a trip of your own. How long has it been since you left this city? Her suggestion planted a seed in my mind that began to grow immediately. That night I couldn't sleep. Diane's words kept echoing in my head. You should plan a trip of your own. When was the last time I had done something purely for myself? I got up and went to my desk where I kept a box of old photographs. There they were, pictures of the places my late husband Jack and I had always dreamed of visiting. New Orleans, the Grand Canyon, the Maine coastline. After his death, I had tucked those dreams away, believing they were no longer possible for a woman alone. But as I looked at those photographs now, I realized something. I had money saved, not much, but some. For the past couple of years, I'd been setting aside $100 monthly from my Social Security check money. I used to spend on unnecessary gifts for Allison, Mark, and the kids. I had accumulated almost not enough for a luxury cruise, but certainly enough to visit my sister Sarah in Florida, something I'd been putting off for years. As this plan took shape in my mind, a delicious idea began to form. What if I went to visit Sarah during the exact 3 weeks that Allison and Mark planned to be in the Bahamas? It would be perfectly fair. They would have their dream vacation, and I would have mine. But something told me this was just the beginning of what would become a much bigger battle for my independence and dignity. Allison had never taken rejection well, even as a child, and Mark's thinly veiled threats still rang in my ears. I would need all my courage to face what was coming. The next morning, I called Sarah. We hadn't spoken in months, but her voice was as warm as ever. "Barbara," she exclaimed, "what a wonderful surprise! I was just thinking about you yesterday." I told her everything that had happened with Allison and Mark, and her reaction made me smile. "It's about time, sis," she said, echoing Diane's words exactly. "I've been telling you for years that they've been taking advantage of you." "Sarah," I said, my heart beating faster with excitement, "would you like me to come visit? I could stay for about 3 weeks." There was a moment of silence, and I feared I'd overstepped. But then I heard her delighted laugh. "Would I like it, Barbara? I'd be thrilled. It's been 3 years since we've seen each other in person. The kids ask about their Aunt Barb all the time." I hung up the phone with a genuine smile on my face, the first in what felt like months. For the first time in years, I had something to look forward to that was entirely my own. Immediately, I went online to check bus fares. A round-trip ticket to Fort Myers would cost me 390 Medes. With my $2,400 in savings, I'd have plenty left over for expenses during my stay. It was perfect. But I had barely begun planning when my phone rang again. It was Allison, and her voice sounded different, calculated, controlled. "Mom," she said, "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday. I think we both said things we didn't mean. Can we start over?" I could tell instantly that she had talked with Mark and they'd devised a new strategy. "Allison," I replied, "I appreciate that, but my position hasn't changed. I won't be watching the children for 3 weeks." "Mom, please," she pleaded, "just hear me out. Mark and I discussed it last night, and we realize we should have asked you before making our plans. That was our mistake. We're sorry." Her words sounded rehearsed, too perfect. "I appreciate the apology, Allison," I said, "but my answer is still no." "But Mom," she continued, switching tactics, "what will the neighbors think when they see Emma and Jake being dropped off at some stranger's house while their own grandmother refuses to take care of them?" She was playing the social reputation card, something that had always been important to me. "The neighbors will think that Barbara has finally learned to value herself," I replied with a confidence that surprised me. Allison was silent for a moment. She hadn't expected that response. "Mom," she said, trying yet another angle, "the kids were crying last night, asking why Grandma doesn't want to see them anymore. How am I supposed to explain that to them?" Her words cut deep. I loved Emma and Jake more than anything. The thought that they might believe I didn't want them broke my heart. But I also knew Allison was lying. The children knew nothing about this argument. She was manipulating my feelings for them. "Don't use the children as emotional weapons, Allison," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "That's cruel and unfair." "I'm not using anyone," she shouted, losing her composure again. "I'm trying to protect my children from their grandmother's selfishness." "Selfishness," I repeated, stunned by the accusation. "Allison, giving you decades of my life isn't selfishness. Handing over my savings isn't selfishness. Canceling my own plans repeatedly to accommodate yours isn't selfishness. Do you know what is selfish? Expecting someone else to sacrifice their life so you can have more comfort and convenience in yours." Allison hung up without another word. I immediately went online and purchased my bus ticket to Florida. There was no turning back now. I would be gone for exactly 3 weeks. The same 3 weeks that Allison and Mark had planned to be in the Bahamas. The coincidence made me smile with a satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. What I was doing felt simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. Barbara Mitchell, the woman who had always put her family first, who never said no, who was always available, was about to disappear right when they needed me most. But deep down, I knew they didn't really need me. They just found me more convenient and economical than hiring professional help. Over the next 2 days, Allison and Mark called relentlessly, alternating between pleading, thinly veiled threats and attempts at bribery. Mark eventually offered me $1,200 for the 3 weeks, almost triple his original offer, but my answer remained the same. No. On Friday afternoon, Allison showed up at my door with Emma and Jake. They were dressed in their cutest outfits, clearly coached for maximum emotional impact. "Grandma," said Jake, my 9-year-old grandson, looking up at me with his big brown eyes. "Mom says you don't want to take care of us anymore because you don't love us enough." My heart shattered hearing those manipulative words coming from an innocent child. I knelt down to his level and looked him straight in the eyes. "My sweet boy," I said. "Grandma loves you and Emma more than anything in this world. But Grandma is also a person who has her own life and her own plans. When you come back from your vacation with Mom and Dad, you can visit me and I'll tell you all about the trip I took to see Aunt Sarah in Florida." Jake's eyes lit up. "You're going on a trip too, Grandma?" he asked excitedly. "Cool, will you bring us presents?" Allison yanked his arm sharply. "We're leaving," she snapped at the children. "Grandma is too busy for us now." The way she emphasized "too busy" was filled with venom and resentment. That evening, Diane came to visit again. I told her about my planned trip to Florida, and she clapped her hands in delight. "Barbara," she said, "I'm so proud of you. You know what? My nephew Jason is an attorney. If Allison and Mark keep harassing you or try to cause trouble, he can help. He specializes in family law." The mention of legal issues alarmed me. "Do you think they could do something against me legally?" I asked, worried. Diane shook her head. "No, honey. They can't force you to babysit their kids. But if they try to defame you or cause problems, it's good to have someone in your corner. Jason's a good guy and wouldn't charge you anything for a consultation." Saturday morning, I received a call I wasn't expecting. It was the principal from Emma and Jake's elementary school. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said, her voice concerned, "Allison asked me to call you. She says you can no longer pick up the children from school because you're having health problems. I wanted to confirm this information because you've never mentioned any medical issues to me." I was stunned. Allison had called the school lying about my health to ensure I couldn't see my grandchildren even after they returned from their trip. "Principal Winters," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I don't have any health problems that would prevent me from caring for the children." "Allison lied to you." There was an uncomfortable silence. "I see," she finally said. "These family situations can be complicated. We'll keep your authorization to pick up the children as it is." After hanging up, I sat trembling with rage. Allison had crossed a line I never thought she would. She wasn't just punishing me. She was actively trying to damage my reputation and separate me from my grandchildren using lies about my health. At that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. I wouldn't just go to Florida during their vacation. I would leave without telling them when I'd return. The call from the school principal made it clear that Allison had declared war. This was no longer just about refusing to babysit. She was actively trying to hurt me and cut me off from Emma and Jake. That afternoon, I called Jason, Diane's attorney nephew, and explained the situation. Jason had a calm, professional voice that immediately put me at ease. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said after hearing my story, "what Allison did with the school could be considered defamation. Lying about your health to restrict your access to your grandchildren is serious." His words confirmed what I already suspected. Allison had gone too far. "What should I do?" I asked. "For now," Jason replied, "document everything. Keep records of all conversations, calls, and messages. If Allison escalates this situation, we'll need evidence. And your trip to Florida is an excellent idea. It demonstrates that you have an independent life and are mentally and physically capable. I felt relieved knowing I had legal support if things got worse. Sunday morning, I began the final preparations for my trip. I had decided to leave on Monday, one day before Allison and Mark were scheduled to depart for the Bahamas. I wanted them to arrive at my apartment on Tuesday with the kids and luggage, only to find an empty home. It wouldn't be a cruel revenge, but rather a lesson in respect. As I packed, the phone rang. It was Mark again, but this time his voice sounded desperate. "Barbara," he said, "Allison told me you've been bad-mouthing us at the school. That's not right. The kids could suffer consequences." I laughed bitterly. "Mark," I replied, "I didn't badmouth you anywhere. I simply told the principal the truth when she asked me about the lies Allison had told about my health." "Lies?" he asked with feigned innocence. "Barbara, Allison was concerned about your well-being. She thought maybe you weren't feeling well, which would explain why you've been acting so strangely." His words infuriated me. "Mark," I said firmly, "I'm not acting strangely. I'm acting like a person who has finally learned to respect herself. If that seems strange to you, it's because you're used to me being your doormat." Mark lost his patience completely. "Look, Barbara, I'll be straight with you. If you don't watch the kids, we'll have to cancel the trip. We'll lose the $12,000 we paid. Are you willing to take responsibility for that?" "Mark," I replied calmly, "you planned and paid for that trip without consulting me. The responsibility for that decision is entirely yours." "But we're family," he shouted. "Families help each other." "You're right," I said. "Families help each other, but they also respect, value, and consider each other. You've failed at all three for years." Mark was silent for a moment. "You know what, Barbara?" he finally said, his voice cold as ice. "If that's your attitude, maybe it's better that the kids don't spend time with someone so negative. We don't want them catching your bitterness." His words felt like a knife to my heart. He was threatening to completely cut me off from my grandchildren. "Mark," I said firmly, "those children are my grandchildren. I have a right to see them." "Rights are earned," he responded cruelly. "And you lost yours when you decided to abandon this family." I hung up the phone, shaking with rage and pain. Immediately, I called Jason. "Grandparents' rights are protected by law," he assured me. "Mark cannot prevent you from seeing your grandchildren without justified cause, and refusing to be a free babysitter is not a justified cause." His words reassured me, but I knew that Allison and Mark would find ways to make my life miserable if I stayed in town during their absence. Sunday night, Diane helped me finish packing. "Did you write the letter?" she asked. "Yes. I had written a letter to leave taped to my door for Allison and Mark to find when they arrived on Tuesday. Dear Allison and Mark," I had written, "when you read this letter, I will be in Florida visiting my sister Sarah. I decided to take a vacation, just like you. The difference is that I didn't need anyone else to sacrifice their life so I could enjoy mine. I will return when I feel it's appropriate. In the meantime, I hope this time gives you a chance to reflect on the meaning of family respect. With love, Mom." Diane read the letter and smiled. "Perfect," she said, firm but dignified. "There's nothing cruel about it, just self-respect." She was right. I wasn't seeking revenge, just reclaiming my self-esteem. That night, I slept better than I had in years. For the first time in a decade, I went to bed without worrying about what Allison and Mark might need from me the next day. Monday morning, Diane drove me to the bus station. "Are you nervous?" she asked as we waited in the check-in line. "A little," I admitted, "but also excited. I haven't traveled alone since, well, I've never traveled completely alone." Diane hugged me. "You're going to be just fine, Barbara. When you come back, you'll be a new woman." As the bus pulled away from the station, I looked out the window and felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete freedom. I didn't have to worry about picking up kids from school. I didn't have to be available for Allison's emergencies. I didn't have to plan my day around other people's needs. For the first time in 10 years, My time was entirely my own. The journey to Florida took 18 hours, but it flew by. I read an entire magazine without interruptions, something I hadn't done in years. When the bus finally arrived at Fort Myers Station, and I saw Sarah waiting for me, I burst into tears of joy. My sister looked as beautiful as ever, with that warm smile I remembered from our childhood. "Barbara?" she shouted when she spotted me and ran to embrace me. "Look at you. You're radiant." I didn't feel radiant, but her joy was contagious. During the drive to her house, I told her all the details of what had happened with Allison and Mark. Sarah listened without interrupting, but I could see the indignation on her face. "Sister," she finally said, "you should have done this years ago. Allison was always a manipulative child, and I see she hasn't changed a bit as an adult." Her words comforted me. Sometimes we need someone from outside to validate what we already know deep down. "But it's done now," Sarah continued, "and you're going to enjoy these 3 weeks like you deserve." Sarah's house was beautiful, filled with plants and cheerful colors. Her husband Tom welcomed me with open arms, and their grown children came to dinner that first night to meet the aunt they'd heard so much about. For the first time in years, I felt part of a family that truly appreciated me, not one that just needed me. That night, as I fell asleep in the guest room that Sarah had specially prepared for me, I thought about Allison and Mark. Tomorrow morning, they would arrive at my apartment with the children and luggage, expecting to find me obediently waiting to begin my 3 weeks of free service. Instead, they would find an empty house and a letter that would make them understand that Barbara had reclaimed her dignity. The smile with which I fell asleep was the most genuine I'd had in a decade. Tuesday morning, I woke up in Florida feeling like a new woman. It was 8 a.m. when my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I instantly knew who it might be. I decided not to answer. Within 5 minutes, it rang again, and again, and out. In total, I received 17 missed calls before noon, all from different numbers. Allison and Mark had found my letter. Sarah prepared a delicious breakfast with tropical fruits I hadn't tasted in years. "Aren't you going to answer the phone?" she asked when it rang for the 10th time. "No," I replied calmly. "Today is my first day of real vacation in 10 years. I'm not going to let Allison and Mark ruin it." Sarah smiled and turned off my phone completely. We spent the morning visiting the local farmers market, where Sarah bought me a beautiful floral dress in vibrant colors. "You look 10 years younger," she told me as I tried it on. And it was true. Looking in the mirror, I saw a woman I hadn't recognized in a long time. A free, smiling, relaxed woman. The worry lines that had developed over the years seemed less pronounced. In the afternoon, when I finally turned on my phone to call Diane and confirm I had arrived safely, I found 43 missed calls and 28 text messages. The messages started out pleading and ended up furious. Allison's first message said, "Mom, please call us. Can we work this out?" The last one, sent an hour earlier, read, "This is unforgivable. I will never forgive you for what you've done to us." But what caught my attention most were 3 messages from unknown numbers. They were from Mark's parents, my in-laws with whom I barely had a relationship. "Barbara," read the message from my mother-in-law. "Allison told us what happened. We can't believe you abandoned the children like this. What kind of grandmother are you?" The venom in her words hurt, but it also showed me how much Allison had distorted the story. Diane answered on the first ring. "Barbara, thank God you called. Allison and Mark came to my door this morning asking if I knew where you were. They were furious, especially Mark." "What happened exactly?" I asked, curious. Diane told me the whole scene. "They arrived at your door around 7 a.m. Allison had the kids, half asleep. Mark was carrying the luggage. When Allison found your letter, she started screaming like a madwoman. 'She can't do this to us,' she kept yelling. Mark was trying to break down your apartment door until I told him I'd call the police." The image made me smile. For the first time in years, Allison had encountered a situation she couldn't control with manipulation or tantrums. "And the children?" I asked, concerned. "The poor things were confused," Diane replied. Jake asked why they were shouting, and Emma started crying. Allison yelled at them that it was their selfish grandmother's fault, but Mark hushed her. At least he had the decency not to involve the children more. Diane continued her account. After an hour of screaming and desperate phone calls, they had to leave. I overheard Mark telling Allison they needed to find an emergency nanny or cancel their trip. Allison was crying, saying it was impossible to find someone available on such short notice. I felt bad for the children, but not for Allison and Mark. They had created this situation with their arrogance. Do you know if they found a nanny? I asked. Jason told me his sister knows an emergency nanny agency, Diane replied. They charge $25 an hour for urgent service, plus expenses. Allison and Mark will have to pay almost $5,000 for the 3 weeks. The math made me smile ironically. They had preferred to pay $5,000 to a stranger rather than offer me the $3,000 that a regular nanny would cost. But there's more, Diane continued. This afternoon, Allison came to your door alone. This time she was crying for real, not those fake tears she usually uses. She begged me to call her, to tell her where I was. She told me she didn't know where she would find someone to watch the kids on such short notice. Diane's words made me reflect. Perhaps Allison was finally understanding the gravity of the situation. What did she say exactly? I asked. She said she realized she had made terrible mistakes, that she never thought you'd actually leave, that Mark was furious with her for creating this whole mess, that the kids wouldn't stop asking about you and she didn't know what to tell them. For the first time, Allison seemed to be experiencing the real consequences of her actions. She also told me something else, Diane continued. Allison admitted she never realized everything you did for them until they had to pay for each service individually. Between the emergency nanny, cleaning services because the kids made more mess than usual, the special food they demanded, medication when Jake got sick, and all the extra expenses, they'd spent over $3,500 in just 48 hours. The math shocked me. In 2 days, they had spent what I normally spent in 5 months taking care of the children. But the most important thing, Diane added, is that Mark had a very serious conversation with me. He said he never realized that what you did was equivalent to the work of a professional nanny, a cook, a driver, a nurse, and a tutor, all at once. They had completely miscalculated the value of your contribution to the family. Mark did the calculations, Diane explained. A professional nanny costs $25 an hour. Someone to cook for the children costs another $60 per day. School transportation is $40 daily. Additional cleaning services when children are in the house cost another $50 per day. In total, the services you provided for free were worth $300 per day, or more than $9,000 monthly. Allison cried when Mark showed her the numbers, Diane told me. She realized that for years, they had been receiving services worth almost $108,000 annually completely free, and you had never charged them even a fraction of that. For the first time, Allison was seeing the true economic value of everything she had taken for granted. After talking with Diane, I remained thoughtful for hours. Sarah found me sitting in her garden, contemplating the flowers. Are you thinking about going back? She asked, sitting beside me. I don't know, I answered honestly. Part of me wants to believe Allison finally understood, but another part is afraid that when I return, things will go back to how they were before. Sister, Sarah said, taking my hand, real change takes time, but what you've accomplished in these first days is extraordinary. Allison lost her dream vacation, spent a fortune, had to face the consequences of her actions, and for the first time in years realized the true value of what you contribute to her life. That afternoon, I decided to call Jason, the attorney. I told him everything that had happened and asked his professional opinion. Mrs. Mitchell, he said, from a legal standpoint, you've handled this situation perfectly. You didn't do anything illegal or cruel. You simply exercised your right to have an independent life. And the fact that Allison had to publicly rectify her lies about your health strengthens your position if there were future problems. Do you think I should return now? I asked, Jason was silent for a moment. That depends on you, he finally responded. But if you decide to return, I suggest you establish very clear boundaries from the beginning. Allison needs to understand that this change is permanent, not temporary. His words gave me much clarity about what I needed to do. Friday morning, I received something unexpected, a voice message from my grandchildren. Allison had given them her phone to record a message for me. "Grandma," said Emma's sweet voice, "we miss you so much. Mom says you're on a trip visiting Aunt Sarah. Can you bring us treats from Florida? We love you lots and want you to come back soon." Then I heard Jake's voice. "Grandma, we don't want strangers taking care of us anymore. We only want you. Mom says when you come back things will be different. Is that true?" The children's message broke my heart and filled me with hope at the same time. They were innocent in all this and truly missed me. But it also gave me hope to hear that Allison had told them things would be different. Perhaps the change was real. That night I made a decision. I would give Allison a chance to prove that the change was genuine, but I would do it on my terms. I wrote a carefully thought out text message. "Allison, I received the children's message, and it filled me with joy to know they're well, but miss me. I've decided to return next Monday, but I need you to understand that things will be different from now on. I am no longer your free babysitter, available 24/7. I am your mother and I deserve respect, consideration, and gratitude. If you're willing to accept this new dynamic, we can rebuild our relationship. If not, I'll have to keep my distance to protect my emotional well-being." I sent the message and within 5 minutes received a response. "Mom, yes, I accept everything. We just want you to come home." The kids haven't stopped crying. Mark and I got the message. "Please forgive us and give us the chance to show you we can change." For the first time in years, Allison wasn't negotiating or setting conditions. She was simply accepting my terms. Sarah read the exchange of messages and smiled. "I think your plan worked perfectly," she said. "Allison had to face the reality of what it means to live without you, and that reality was much harsher than she expected." She was right. Allison had learned in the most effective way possible, by directly experiencing the consequences of her actions. Saturday morning, I bought gifts for my grandchildren and some souvenirs for Diane and other friends. I felt excited to return, but also nervous. Words were easy. Actions would be the real test. Allison had said she was willing to change, but she had to prove to me she meant it. Sunday night, my last night in Florida, Sarah and I had a long conversation about the future. "Sister," she said, "these 3 weeks have changed you. You look stronger, more confident. Promise me you won't let Allison walk all over you again." I promised her I wouldn't. I had learned to value myself and I wasn't going back. "And promise me something else," Sarah continued, "that you'll visit me more often. You don't have to wait for a family crisis to give yourself permission to have your own life." Her words made me laugh, but they also made me reflect. She was right. I needed to maintain my independence and personal life, regardless of what happened with Allison. Monday morning, as I waited for my bus back home, I felt like a completely different woman from the one who had arrived 3 weeks earlier. I had reclaimed my dignity, established my boundaries, and demonstrated that I could have a full and independent life. Now I had to see if Allison had truly learned her lesson, or if I would have to defend my boundaries once again. The bus arrived in my city at 3 p.m. on Monday. As I got off with my suitcase, my heart was racing. I didn't know exactly what awaited me, but I felt prepared for any situation. I had changed during these 3 weeks, and that change was permanent. I was no longer the submissive grandmother who allowed herself to be manipulated. I was a woman who knew her worth and was ready to defend it. Diane was waiting for me at the station with a huge smile. "Barbara," she shouted as she ran to hug me, "you look spectacular. Florida really agreed with you." She was right. I felt renewed, full of energy and confidence. During the drive home, Diane updated me on everything that had happened during my final week away. "Allison came by every day asking if there was any news from you," Diane told me. "The kids came with her, and looked so sad. But I could also see something different in Allison. She no longer had that arrogant attitude. She looked humble, maybe for the first time in her adult life. Her words gave me hope, but I remained cautious. When we reached my building, I saw Allison's car parked outside. My heart raced. Did she know I was coming home today? I asked Diane. I told her your bus was arriving this afternoon, but not the exact time, she replied. She's been here since noon. Allison's determination to wait for me for hours showed that perhaps her remorse was genuine. We climbed the stairs to my apartment, and before we reached my door, I saw her. Allison was sitting on the floor in the hallway with Emma and Jake cuddled next to her. When they saw me, the children shouted, "Grandma," and ran toward me. The hug they gave me was the sweetest I had received in years. I felt tears filling my eyes as I held my grandchildren in my arms again. Allison stood up slowly, her eyes red and swollen. She looked different, smaller somehow. "Mom," she said with a broken voice, "thank you for coming back." She didn't rush toward me as she would have done before to manipulate me with tears and drama. She stood at a respectful distance, waiting for me to take the initiative. "Hello, Allison," I replied with a neutral voice. Not cold, but not warm either. I needed to see what she had to say before deciding how to react. The children excitedly told me about everything that had happened while I was away, how they had missed my cooking, my bedtime stories, my hugs. Their words confirmed that I had done the right thing by leaving. They had learned to value what they had taken for granted. "Mom," Allison said when the children calmed down a bit, "could we talk privately? There are so many things I need to tell you." I nodded and asked the children to go with Diane to her apartment for a moment. Diane immediately understood and took them with her, promising to show them the photos from my Florida vacation. Once we were alone, Allison and I entered my apartment. She sat on the couch where it had all started 3 weeks earlier, but this time her posture was completely different. She didn't have that possessive and demanding attitude. She looked vulnerable, remorseful, almost like a child who had done something terrible, and finally understood the magnitude of her actions. "Mom," she began with a trembling voice, "these 3 weeks were the worst of my life. Not just because of the money we lost or having to cancel the trip, but because I realized how horrible I've been to you all these years." Her words sounded different from all the superficial apologies she had given me before. There was something genuine in her voice that I hadn't heard in decades. "Go on," I said without committing to any emotional response. I needed to hear everything she had to say before deciding whether to believe her or not. Allison continued. "When we had to hire the emergency nanny, I realized for the first time everything you did for us. It wasn't just watching the kids, Mom. You were our cook, our driver, our nurse, our tutor, our cleaner, our organizer. You were everything." Tears started rolling down her cheeks as she continued. "Mark showed me the numbers. Mom, in 2 days we spent over $3,500 on services you gave us for free every month. I realized that for years we received services worth hundreds of thousands of dollars and never, not once, did we truly thank you or acknowledge the sacrifice you were making for us." Allison rose from the sofa and knelt before me, something she had never done in her adult life. "Mom," she said, taking my hands, "I'm not just asking for forgiveness for these 3 weeks. I'm asking forgiveness for the last 10 years, for treating you like our personal employee, for taking your love, your time, your money, your life for granted, for making you feel like you weren't important when you're the most important person in our lives." Her words touched me deeply, but I maintained my composure. "Allison," I said firmly, "words are easy. What I need to see are actions, real changes in how you treat me." Allison nodded vigorously. "Mom, Mark and I have talked a lot during these 3 weeks. We've made a list of changes we want to implement immediately." She pulled a paper from her purse and began to read. "First, we will never take you for granted again. If we need you to watch the kids, we'll ask with enough notice, not demand. Second, we'll pay you what your work is worth. We calculated that a professional nanny charges $25 per hour, So that's what we'll pay you when you watch the children. I was surprised. I hadn't expected them to come up with those figures. Third, Allison continued, we'll respect your free time. No more emergency calls unless it's a real medical emergency. Fourth, we'll pay back the money we owe you. The $310,000 from the house, the $25,000 we borrowed when Mark lost his job, and the $85,000 from my failed business. Mark got a personal loan to start paying you back. Here's the first payment of $10,000. She took a check from her purse and showed it to me. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Allison had really done serious calculations and taken concrete measures. Is Mark on board with all this? I asked. Mom, she replied. Mark was the one who insisted on making these changes. He feels more ashamed than I do, if that's possible. He wanted to come today, but we thought it would be better if you and I talked first. Allison continued with her list. Fifth, we want you to have your own life. If you want to travel, take classes, do activities, we'll support you completely. Sixth, we want to truly include you in the family, not just when we need something. Regular dinners, outings together, conversations that aren't just about the kids or our problems. I stood up and walked to the window, processing everything I had heard. It was exactly what I had hoped to hear for years. But I needed to be sure it wasn't just a desperate reaction that would disappear over time. Allison, I said without turning to look at her, all this sounds wonderful, but I need to see these changes maintained for months, not just weeks. Mom, she responded with a firm voice, I understand your distrust. We completely deserve it, but I swear on my children's lives that these changes are permanent. These 3 weeks changed me forever. I saw what it's like to lose the most important person in my life because of my own stupidity and selfishness. I never want to feel that terror again. I turned to look at her and saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. Genuine respect. Plus, Allison continued, Diane gave me Jason's number, the attorney. If at any point you feel we're falling back into old patterns, I want you to call him immediately. I don't want you to suffer in silence as you did for so many years. At that moment, there was a knock at the door. It was Mark with the children, who had returned from Diane's apartment. Mark looked different too, more serious, more mature somehow. Barbara, he said as soon as he entered, I don't have words to express how ashamed I am. Allison and I were terrible ingrates, and you didn't deserve even a second of the mistreatment we gave you. The children ran to me again, and this time I could hug them without the tension of the previous weeks. Grandma, Emma said, Mom says things are going to be different now, that we're going to take better care of you. Is that true? Her innocence broke my heart. Yes, my love, I replied. Things are going to be different, better. Mark handed me the $10,000 check that Allison had mentioned. Barbara, he said, this is just the beginning. We're going to pay you everything we owe you with interest. And from now on, you're going to be treated with the respect and gratitude you always deserved. His words sounded sincere, but time would tell if they were real. That night, after they left, I sat in my favorite armchair with a cup of tea and reflected on everything that had happened. I had reclaimed my dignity, established my boundaries, and demonstrated that I wasn't indispensable in the way they thought, but valuable in a way they had taken for granted. Allison and Mark had learned a costly but necessary lesson. 3 months later, I can say the changes were real. Allison pays me faithfully every time I watch the children. She always asks me in advance if I'm available, and never makes me feel guilty if I say no. Mark treats me with a respect he never showed before. They have kept up with the monthly payments of $2,000 to pay off their debt to me, but the most important thing is that I have reclaimed my life. I took painting classes, joined a book club, planned another trip to visit Sarah. I am no longer just the grandmother available 24/7. I am Barbara, a 68-year-old woman with her own life, her own dreams, and her own dignity. Sometimes people only learn to value what they have when they lose it. Allison and Mark had to lose their free babysitter, cancel their dream vacation, spend thousands of dollars, and face the complete chaos of their lives to finally understand what they had been wasting for years. But in the end, we all won. They got back a mother and mother-in-law who loves them, but who respects herself. And I got back a family that finally values me as I deserve. The sweetest revenge isn't making others suffer, but reclaiming your own worth and living the life you deserve. And that's exactly what I did.